You see, life is full of complex dynamics, and relationships, romantic relationships in particular, are no exception. When a woman leaves, when she walks away, when she distances herself, it can feel like an irreparable loss. And yet, as time passes, as the dust settles, as the emotions cool and rationality begins to take hold, you may find something peculiar happens. She returns. But why? Why does absence create desire? Why does withdrawal sometimes lead to reconnection? That's what we're going to explore today. There's a fundamental psychological principle at play here, and that is the idea of scarcity and value. When something is abundant, when it's easily accessible, human beings tend to take it for granted. This is as true in relationships as it is in economics. If you are always there, if you are always responding, always chasing, always available, you are not perceived as scarce. And if something is not scarce, it is not as valuable. Now, let's reverse that. If you remove yourself from the equation, if you impose distance, suddenly a void appears. And the human mind, particularly the female mind, when it comes to romantic attachment, is prone to filling that void with speculation, nostalgia, and even longing. This is where curiosity begins to build. You need to understand that human attraction is deeply rooted in neurological reward mechanisms. When a woman experiences excitement, joy, laughter, or deep emotional moments with you, those experiences are chemically encoded in her brain. The dopamine reward system associates you with those positive emotional highs. Now, what happens when you're removed from the equation? The brain doesn't simply delete that emotional coding. Instead, it begins to revisit those memories, especially in moments of solitude, comparison, or dissatisfaction. If she encounters other men who fail to meet the standard you set, or if she finds herself in situations that lack the depth she once felt with you, the brain starts drawing comparisons. And this is critical. When she reaches back into her memory, she doesn't remember the factual details of your relationship as much as she remembers the emotions attached to them. If your presence was associated with strong emotional highs, that longing, that curiosity, and that sense of unfinished business all begin to surface. Now, let's talk about the paradox of detachment. You see, one of the biggest mistakes men make after a breakup or after a period of distance is that they allow neediness to take over. They chase, they plead, they try to negotiate their way back into her life. And this is where things go terribly wrong. Women, at a deep psychological level, do not respect weakness. They may feel pity for it, they may feel guilt, but they do not feel attraction toward it. Attraction is rooted in admiration. It is drawn towards strength, self-sufficiency, and purpose. If you fall apart in her absence, if you become consumed by despair, if your existence revolves around her validation, you become less attractive, not more. But what happens when you walk away with dignity? When you maintain your path, your purpose, your sense of self, suddenly, the frame shifts. Suddenly, she is the one questioning. Why isn't he chasing me? Why isn't he breaking down? Why does he seem just fine? And this creates a psychological trigger. Because if you were once of value to her, and if that value is not easily replaced, the human mind begins to rationalize why reconnecting might be necessary. You see, people often fail to recognize the power of time and reflection in relationships. When you first separate from someone, emotions run high. There's tension, frustration, resentment. But as time passes, something fascinating happens. Those raw emotions begin to settle, and what emerges instead is perspective. Time gives space for reflection. And in that space, a woman begins to reevaluate Was the breakup truly necessary? Was the issue that serious? Were the problems greater than the positives? Now, here's the key. If during this time you have remained strong, composed, and focused on your own self-improvement, the contrast becomes even starker, because the woman isn't just reflecting on the past, she's also observing your present. And if your present is one of growth, self-discipline, and progress, you become infinitely more attractive in retrospect. And what happens when admiration is rekindled? What happens when the contrast between you and her alternatives becomes apparent? The door reopens. Now, there's another crucial aspect here that most people overlook, and that is the concept of unfinished psychological loops. You see, when relationships end abruptly or under emotional circumstances, the human mind often fails to achieve closure. The subconscious continues running through what-if scenarios. What if things had been different? What if we had worked through that issue? What if I misjudged the situation? Women, especially those who experience deep emotional bonds, struggle with this unresolved tension. And when you don't chase, when you don't break the no-contact rule, when you simply disappear into self-improvement, you leave that loop open in her mind. And open loops demand closure. And here's the fascinating part. Many times, a woman will reach out not even fully understanding why. She may tell herself she just wants to check in. She may rationalize that she just wants to be friends. But what's really happening is that the mind is seeking to resolve the ambiguity. And if, in that moment, she perceives you as stronger, more refined, more grounded than before, the attraction is reignited. So, what does all of this mean for you? What are the practical takeaways? No contact is powerful because it forces reevaluation. Absence creates scarcity, and scarcity increases perceived value. Time allows emotional memories to resurface. A woman does not forget emotional highs. She revisits them. Your strength is your greatest asset. Neediness repels, while self-sufficiency attracts. The paradox of detachment creates curiosity. When you do not chase, you create the conditions for her to wonder. Unfinished psychological loops demand resolution. If the relationship ended without full closure, the mind will seek to complete the narrative. Now, I'm not saying every woman will come back. Some won't. Some will move on, and that's fine. Because the goal here is not to wait. It is not to hope. It is not to dwell. The goal is to improve yourself to the point where whether she returns or not becomes irrelevant. Because at that stage, you are not just waiting, you are building. You are becoming something greater. And that's the real lesson here. You don't win her back by chasing. You win her back by becoming the kind of man she realizes she should never have left. And if you can understand that, if you can embody that, you don't just get her back, you get yourself back. If you found value in this, if this resonated with you, then let me know your thoughts. Like, subscribe, and remember, the best way to move forward is not to chase, but to grow. I'll see you in the next one.